Hey, good afternoon. Doug Padgett in today here with Brett on Tuesday. You might be noticing a little schedule here around the AM 950 Progressive Voice of Minnesota 4 o'clock hour. Brett, have we ever really explained to people what our rhythm is of who's hosting and who's producing and how that goes? Have we ever walked the fine people through the back office schedulings?
A little bit. I did kind of in December, although aren't we still focus group testing and running this through all of our different groups?
That's right.
It's millions of dollars we've budgeted towards putting this through focus groups, making sure we get the imaging and the branding right.
Yeah, we're really sharpening the focus, and so you're going to get a deep Tuesday dive on what we think that the listeners really, really want on a Tuesday. That's not true, but we do pay a lot of attention, and normally. This is your hour. I feel like I should be at the studio and calling the guests, and you should be having to talk during the in between times.
This actually worked out well for me because if you notice, I have a bit of a cold going on, and I'm not sure I could talk for a whole hour today. So
well, I did notice that
this worked out. Yes,
and I noticed it on the when you did the weather. And I thought maybe you were just doing sort of a piece of performance art about the declining temperature today. I thought maybe you were going with the intentional stuffed nose sound. It's amazing, isn't it, how many people that you listen to regularly in your life on radio or television or movies, and very rarely does somebody ever have to sort of negotiate the fully congested sound. How do we do that? How is it that it works out? Do we just rise above? You think that's what's happening? We just find our way to rise above our stuffed up heads?
I suppose so. Yeah, we must be doing something like that.
I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of curious. I've never sat out a one of my days here with a stuffed head. It's just sort of worked out that when I've had a runny nose or a congested sound, I don't know. I wasn't talking to this microphone.
Yeah, really, the only way you'd kind of sit it out is if you literally had no voice, because then you'd just be broadcasting dead air.
That's right. Hey, we're looking forward to the possibility of chatting with my state representative, Heather Edelson, today. If we think they're still in session, but she has offered to come and chat with us today. So if that happens, keep that phone and or your computer or iPad or visual device tuned in here, because I can't wait to hear how it's going for the launch of the legislative session, which started today. So we're officially in business. The people elected by the people are doing the people's work, and they're starting today. So we want to do a little check-in on that. And the governor got to take his oath yesterday. I think the legislators took their oath today. Is that right, or did they do it yesterday? Do you know, Brett? Do you know the details on that?
I am not sure. Obviously, as you said, the state elected officials did that yesterday. They might have been sworn in today for the legislator, but do have a quick update. Matt and I were chatting. They might be running late on the floor as the Republican leadership was apparently throwing a little bit of a hissy fit over some of the rule changes that the DFL
is that so?
Proposing. Yes.
And on the House side.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's Kurt Dowd is mainly the guy who's not happy about some of these rule changes that the DFL wants to, which in my opinion would add more transparency to the process. But apparently Kurt doesn't like it, though.
Well, I didn't follow that today. What are the rule change? And did these come as a big surprise? Is that what some of the huffiness is about?
I don't think so. I haven't followed this completely outside of what Matt was kind of saying, but okay. I know the DFL wants to kind of prevent that omnibus prime bill from happening again. Or if you remember last session, Republicans were cramming everything into one bill and then saying, 20 minutes left in the session. Vote on this 5,000-page bill and say yes or no. I think the DFL is trying to prevent that from happening. But, a little drama on the floor, I guess.
Well, there we go. See, now I'm even more interested in talking with Representative Edelson to find out her first day in the new job. And there's already some fireworks and drama going on over there. Well, there should be. I'll tell you. I mean, that's one of my thoughts about how those bills got put together. Apparently, we're the only legislature that is split party in the country this year, where the House, because I think all but one state has a bicameral legislature, meaning that there's a House and a Senate. Apparently, Jesse Ventura, do you know about this? Do you remember this? Jesse Ventura argued that we should get rid of the House and Senate and just have people that are elected. I don't know what they would call a unicameral, that they call somebody, but just a unicameral approach. So you wouldn't have representatives and senators. You would just have one group. So the reconciliation, wouldn't have to happen between two houses, between two sides. But it does, because there's this split, that Minnesota reflects what's happening at the national level now, where the House is in the hands of the Democrats and the Senate's in the hands of the Republicans. And so the Republicans here in Minnesota, they have a 2-seat, and that could drop after the election in February, a special election, down to 1 seat, but a 2-seat majority. And it will be interesting to see if they can move some bills through, breaking them apart, because part of what happened last year was they crammed everything into this one big bill and then got to the end and couldn't get a yes because there were too many things that people felt like they had to say no to, especially leading into the election. And that hasn't made sense to me. I don't understand across the board, and I would love to hear, maybe Representative Edelson or someone else can explain this to us, what the thinking is, what the logic is about these omnibus bills, or these big ones where you put many things that aren't related to each other into one big bill. I don't understand it unless it's just a political move, like they want to keep the details out of easy reach for people. And if that's the case, then they're even a worse idea. But if there is some positive reason why you would put what seemingly to be such disparate ideas into the same bill, I would love to know what that is. It doesn't seem to me that that's a good idea. And so if that's what they're hunkering down about, if that's what they're going to fight about, I think it's a great idea. But apparently, they're going to have to get that together between the House and the Senate. So because they're going to have two different opinions about that. But I really hope there's all this goodwill right now, right? Governor Walz is off saying, hey, it's my job to make sure that this is functional, that things are happening the way that they're supposed to, that things are moving ahead. And that the accomplishments that he promised are made possible. And I heard him today making some comments where he said, "It's on me. I've got to take it, and I will take the responsibility." And of course, House Speaker Melissa Hortman, she's got her approach to what she wants to see, happen. And I'm really looking forward to the House and the governor working together to sort of craft an agenda. And to push that through, I'm somebody that advocates for making sure that you argue your points and don't just negotiate. Right? I think negotiation in politics should come, and there's no doubt you have to do it. Partly because you're having to negotiate with, if you have a split representation like we do here in Minnesota, but also just to acknowledge the fact that there are other political parties in this state, primarily, one other political party. But you really do have to consider them, right? They need a win too. If you're going to want anything positive to happen, you're going to want something. If you want a sense that people in this state are collectively engaging with one another, you really do need that. But that negotiation, those compromises, which come in politics, that's part of what politics are. Is they are most certainly about compromises. Those compromises need to come after robust debate and argument and letting an idea have a chance to fester and see if it can win over the people who are opponents, either political opponents or ideological opponents. So one of the things that I hope happens early on in this legislative session is that the DFL starts to make its arguments, puts its point of view out, and tries to draw in not only other legislators but also to draw in the voters and the population and the public. I really hope that they work hard to make a point and pitch their idea, because if you don't make a point and you don't pitch your idea, and all you do is immediately move to either become obstinate or to become compromising, then you've really missed an opportunity to bring people along. I like that phrase that you want to win the argument, not just win the election, because ultimately winning over the argument, having an idea that is compelling and is winsome and draws people in and pushes them forward, that's the very thing that in the long run is what you want to accomplish. You don't just want to win an election and then pass a bill. What you really want to do is be sure you're moving the reason, the rationale, and the thought behind why the bill is important. And I'm going to talk about a couple of these when we come back here from the break, because you can see them specifically around funding of education and funding of healthcare. Two different perspectives between the Democrats, the DFL party, and the Republican Party here in Minnesota. They have two different views. And unfortunately, in my view, from my perspective, the Republicans' ideas tend to be more well understood and argued for in your broad public conversation than do the Democratic ideas. Now, most often people still want to vote for a Democrat because on the whole, they really like what a Democrat stands for. But on some of the very issues that the Democrats are arguing for, many people have been convinced that the Republicans' argument is the right one. And this is part of the reason people get so confused in our in our state and get themselves all turned around. So that's one of the things I hope that this DFL-led House and governor really work hard to do, is to bring people along as well as their own fellow representatives and senators. So we'll talk about that when we come back after the break. AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Hey, welcome back, AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Doug Padgett in. And Brett, do we have my fine Representative Heather Edelson on the line already?
Indeed we do.
Hello, Representative Edelson.
Hey, Doug.
Hey, congratulations. And
Thank you.
Yeah, what a big deal. You've been longing for this role for a long time. I'm one of your supporters and voters, so I want to thank you. But also want to know, what's it like in your first day as a representative in the State House of Minnesota?
Well, it's Doug. It's a true honor, first of all, to serve the great people of Edina. And it's been a very busy day. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of bills that are being proposed behind. Well, I guess a lot of people are wanting to show you the bills that they are working on. But we had our first day of session where I was officially sworn in today, and it was great. There was also a caveat too, where we had lots of debate about temporary rules, which were temporary. So that was quite interesting. Speaker Dowd, former Speaker Dowd, now Minority Leader Dowd.
There you go.
Really kind of made quite a big deal about temporary rules that I didn't know that it didn't necessarily need to be. And I think it was a lot of theatrics were playing out today in the Minnesota House.
Were those temporary rule insertions something you knew about, or were you in the session and this is all coming up and you're having to sort of learn as the arguments are being made?
Yeah, his amendments came up during session.
Okay.
Not before session. People were not given prior notice on this. Mm-hmm. And so, with that being said, I just can't emphasize enough that these were temporary rules, that, the adoption of the formal rules for the Minnesota House as Representative Winkler had, very, spoke well of, very clearly about, is that we will be adopting rules that are like every other session. And so as I watched kind of what Republicans put forth today on the House floor, about transparency, and the reality is Democrats want a lot of transparency. We're very much for that. And we also want a good process. And today, the process was very interesting to kind of see unfold.
Talk a little bit about what happens between Election Day and Swearing In Day for someone who's a new representative. What's the process, and also what's the personal side for you? Like, how does that go? What did you spend your time doing, and to get yourself, I guess, formally ready? And what was going on in your thinking over the last 2 months or so?
Sure. It was. at first when you win, it's overwhelming. You're very excited, and there's a lot to learn. First we had several trainings that happened and took place about the legislative process. And, how to introduce a bill. With that, then you try to figure out what committees you'd like to be on, and then there's a selection process. And then if you're, somebody like me, where you don't just select the committee, you actually want to lobby to make sure you get on those committees.
Yes.
There's a lot of pressure there, too, to make sure that you're having the right people contact the other right people so that you can actually get on the committees you want to be on.
And how did that go for you?
And then there's this first day.
Did you get on the committees that you wanted to? Don't you get to pick four and your top four, and then you get two of those sometimes? Is that how the process goes?
Correct. You get to pick six,
okay,
and then after that, you're absolutely right. You hopefully you'll get you'll get three of those six. And honestly, I got my top three. Energy was my number four. So it actually worked out really quite well. I was very happy with the committees I wanted to be in. Education finance was one of the biggest ones for me that I wanted to be on. I talked a lot about education throughout my campaign.
Right.
As somebody that has been a therapist, a mental health therapist, I know that we need more mental health in our schools. We have this disparity with our counselors. I talked a lot about gun legislation, so I'm really that's a bill that I'm really excited to sign on to that I know will be in the works right now. And
do you so after that process you get your committee, how long ago did you learn what committees you would be on?
I think that was like 2 weeks ago that I found out.
Oh wow, okay. So so then you I'm so interested in the process. Then do they start sending you a bunch of information about bills that were in that committee last year that didn't move through, or what is that process for someone moving from, well, this is what I would like to work on, to actually now hitting the ground running, on this first day of work?
Well, I think that it really is up to the representative of how they're going to do it. Yes, you can wait until the committee starts. But what I did is, I read a lot of the wrap-up, the last session's wrap-up, to see what happened at the end of the last session. So I am the vice chair of Public Safety and Criminal Justice Reform.
Okay.
So with that committee, I really want to, as I support Chair Mariani, I want to make sure that I know what didn't pass last legislative session, so that I can. We imagine that those bills, if they were good bills, will come back again. And so, there's a lot of digging that you can do. Like there's, for education finance, I ask for a lot of numbers because I want to know how much each district gets in terms of state funding. But also I want to know how much their local governments are contributing to their accounts as well. So, there's a lot of digging you can do as your own personal, as a rep. But that's up to each individual person.
Well, how much did you learn about, like, education's been important to you? You campaigned on it, you know it well. How much have you learned just in these last 2 weeks? Now that you're on that committee and you have access to some of that, have you realized, wow, this is I really knew most of what I needed to know, or boy, there's a whole lot here that I hadn't had access to previously?
Yeah, no, there's a lot more that I have access to that I didn't. And I think it's great because you have a support staff to help you make sure that you get those, the right numbers. But yeah, the reality is nobody, when you campaign, you're so busy campaigning that you don't get to actually do the policy work. And so you're just talking about doing the policy work. But now that the campaign has slowed down, and the campaign is, right now I feel like my job is to serve the people of Edina, whether they are Republican or Democrat or independent. So my job right now is to make sure that I do the things that I campaigned on. And so that is digging into those numbers. That's making sure we have accountability. That's making sure that we're addressing issues like the deficits that we're seeing in our public schools.
Yeah.
Even in Edina, we struggle. And then you look at districts like St. Paul and Minneapolis, and they have even larger deficits. And so as we look into how can we help our public schools in the months ahead, I will be very focused on that.
It feels like 15 years ago or so, the Pawlenty administration really devastated funding for education in the state, that we used to be really proud of our education and the outcomes, and we knew that dollar amount went to outcomes. And that was really decimated. I mean, they just robbed it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the one thing that we should also anybody that is an advocate of public schools, of making sure that that good foundation is really there to provide everybody the opportunity to thrive. I mean, the fact that we have a teacher as a governor should give us all hope.
Right. Well, other than those people who've always think that teachers
are, I think, in Minnesota.
Yeah, I remember back when the Pawlenty's administration was around, they were trying to argue that teachers were overpaid because they didn't work in the summer. I mean, it was really so. I'm sure there are some people who are freaked out that there's a governor who has a teacher's background. Hey, we have to go into a commercial break. Do you have to go, or can you hang on for a couple more minutes through the commercial break?
I apologize.
I totally get it.
I have another meeting.
Go.
Really
You've got good work to do. We will keep up with you.
Chat.
Yeah, I'm really glad we did. We'll keep up with you.
I hope I can join again.
We will keep the invitation open to you all the time. That's Heather Edelson. She's the rep from Edina and my rep. So thank you, Representative, and go do the people's work.
On it. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
All right. Hey, we'll be back here after the break. AM 950, Progressive Voice of Minnesota.
As I said, listen to the hours and
Hey, welcome back, AM 950 listeners. It's the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. The legislature's off and running. We just chatted with Heather Edelson. She's the representative from District 49 Edina. She represents my district. I'm going to stay in touch and want to keep her working on the things that matter to us. One of the big dividing points, Brett, maybe you heard this, that's going to be between the Republicans that are controlling the Senate and the Democrats, the DFL, that's in control of the House with the governor at their back, is what happens around health care. And I was saying in the first segment that one of the things that I think has happened for a lot of people on some topics is they vote for Democrats on health care. But when you talk to people, as I do very often, even progressives, even Democrats, tend to parrot the language and the arguments and the points that are being made by Republicans. One of the things Republicans have done well is they have found a way to phrase their point of view in a way that people feel like it's common sense. It makes sense to them. It often isn't. And healthcare is one of the great illustrations of this. So one of the arguments that the DFL are making is that a way to deal with a healthcare problem in this state, in the state of Minnesota, is there's roughly 155,000 people who are not on Minnesota Care, but they're also not an employer-based insurance program. So they're not getting an insurance program that comes through their work and then is part of a large pool and where the insurer can take get a whole lot of customers and spread out the savings across all those customers. What happens is we now, and I'm in this category, you have to go buy it on the individual market. So you log into Minsure and you go hunting around and you're looking up insurance plans. And you're kind of picking between a silver, one that comes through North Memorial or something, the gold one that's with Fairview. And I mean, it's kind of like going on and buying a car online or something, right? Or picking a phone plan, except it's like, $800, $900, $1,200, $1,700 a month. Like it's a huge, huge amount of money, right? It's just disastrous. And once you are paying your own health care premiums, all of them for your health care insurance, you're like, holy man of goodness, that is a big number, right? And what the DFL wants to say is give those people that buy their own insurance, they're not in a group, give them a chance to buy in to Minnesota Care. Minnesota Care is the Medicare-backed system that allows people whose income needs to be supported. Now, this is a little different than if you don't make enough money, then the government gives you a subsidy to still go buy in the market. Let them buy right into the Medicare-based version. That's what the DFL wants to do. I think it's a great idea. It's very deliberately a step toward universal health care. It's what single payer would be, meaning that everybody pays the same, pays to the same supplier of health insurance. I think it's the direction we should go. It seems to be the absolute rationale for such a thing. What the Republicans want to do is they want to make sure that your health care bill is more understandable and that there's more transparency in how much your health care costs. So they will say, what we want to do is reduce health care costs. Now, ultimately, reducing health care costs doesn't save the insured, the person paying the premiums, a lot of money until the insurer passes that along, right? You reduce health care costs, the people who are saving the money are the people who have to pay for the health care, which is the insurance companies. So ultimately, reducing those costs is going to first hit the insurance company because they're going to be paying out less in services. And then if they decide or are mandated to, then they pass the savings onto you. So it doesn't really impact you. But what a lot of people think is, well, yeah, healthcare stuff costs a lot of money. We should make that cheaper. I don't understand my bill. They want to help me understand my bill. Those are two things that seem like they solve my problem. They don't ultimately solve your problem because ultimately you don't care if you understand your bill if the bill isn't so cripplingly expensive. And this is one of the places where I think the DFL has to start making the argument about why their big move is to get people onto Minnesota Care, so you could start to allow people to make a choice to not be on their private health care insurance if it's more expensive. But that's one of the places where it can feel like what the Republicans are arguing for is to make health care costs more transparent and to make it simpler for you to negotiate a better price with your doctor. Nobody's going to negotiate a better price with their doctor. I mean, that's unbelievable. Can you imagine such a thing? Right? I mean, it's based on this illusion, and it's this thing that comes out about Republicans all the time. There's this like fictional world they live in. It must have hobbits and like wizards, because in that world, an individual says, you know what, it's going to cost me $400 more to have my tonsils taken out. If I keep going to my same ear, nose, and throat person, I think I'm going to shop around and maybe start over with a new ear, nose, and throat doctor.
Yeah, I mean, and Doug, you're someone who has kids. I mean, if you had a little kid that had a broken arm, you wouldn't go to the doctor and say, "Oh, can I get a quote first?" That's too much. I guess we're going to drive across town to the other hospital.
You know, it's funny.
That's not how it works at all.
Did my
that's the extreme example, as you said. Even on routine stuff like your tonsil, well, that's not routine tonsils, but it's something you plan out. But you're still not shopping around for a quote.
No. What? Did my kid's therapist tell you that I did that one time when he broke his arm? Is that how you got that story, or were you just making a wild guess? Oh yeah. That I was at the the emergency room negotiating the prices. I mean, this is what the Republicans at the federal level have thought is a great idea. Have every hospital and doctor list their prices on the website so you can look up how much it is to have your arm reset and casted, because maybe you'll want to drive down the road to get a better price. It's unbelievable that people think that if they could hold their own health care cost down, that's ultimately going to save them money. The thing that cripples most people is their insurance premium and a major medical experience. For anyone who doesn't have a major medical experience, cancer, an accident that's going to cause you to go bankrupt, the thing that is crushingly expensive are your premiums. That's what's crippled. That's why people don't get insurance, because the premiums are so high. The thing you have to drive down are the premiums, the amount you have to pay for health insurance. And the idea that the way you're going to lower health insurance premiums is ultimately to lower health insurance costs, That's like the voodoo of whatever makes economics work. If you can imagine an insurance company that's going to say to its either its nonprofit board or to its, if you're in other states, its for-profit shareholders, hey, you know what? We didn't spend as much this year on paying out claims. You know what we ought to do next year? We ought to really cut those premiums in a way that's going to be meaningful to people. The reason they don't is because they're afraid that next year they're running actuarial tables and they're just like, we're going to go broke. So the idea that making your health insurance more reasonable, your health insurance pricing more reasonable is going to actually solve the problem, it doesn't. It sounds like it's something we should have, which we should. Prices should be more clear. No doubt about it. The prices should be more clear. But that's not what's going to drive down your healthcare. But this is the thing that people end up arguing. So I hear people arguing all the time, progressives, if they're not somebody who buys their own insurance, they make the Republicans' argument that what we need to do is lower healthcare costs. What we need to do is get more people on cheaper insurance. That's what you have to do. Get everybody on less expensive insurance. It's a real thing. Hey, David from Shakopee, you've got a question or a comment about health insurance and what the state can do about it.
Well, it's actually about the prices of health care itself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it's a question because I don't know for sure. I've heard, and I've been unable to track down, whether or not it's true, that there's a group of doctors that decide, they get together and they say, okay, this is how much it should cost for this kind of surgery, and this is how much it should cost for this procedure, because this is the amount of training that goes into it and the skill level. And that's pretty much decided across the board for the whole country. Now, correct me if so I'm asking, do you know anything about that? Is that how it's, figured out?
That's a great question. We should crowdsource that. I don't know. I know that's true. Like with auto repair, there's like a book that tells you how long it should take, to change a transmission or, to put new rotors on your car. So when you go into a car place, they have the list of the prices and they just say, look, we charge $45 an hour. Somebody else charges $60 an hour. Somebody else $35. That's the difference in the price. But it's based on this norm. Maybe that's the same thing with these costs that are especially around ones that have to take Medicare or Medicaid, or in this state, Minnesota Care.
Right. So
my guess is that's probably true.
So the follow-up question to that is, if that's the case, then how can we price shop if the prices are already fixed?
Right. So what would happen? It would essentially be a very similar thing to what you do with a car, where some hospital would say we can charge less for the hours. But I think you're right. I think you're onto something, that the market is not free. The market's not based on what a person would pay for it. The market is based on a whole set of other conditions. But that's a really good point. Maybe we could get the healthcare commissioner on, Health and Human Services commissioner on sometime, and ask if that's true, especially around Minnesota Care. Because one of the big pushbacks from people is Republicans is that Minnesota Care doesn't pay enough, and if you put too many people on it in rural Minnesota, the hospitals and doctors won't be paid enough because they've negotiated that price down so low, which tells you that you can negotiate some prices down, but it still doesn't really solve the problem. It's the real deal. Hey, David, thanks for listening. Thanks for the call. Hey, Mark, do you want to jump on now with 40 seconds left for a commercial, or do you want to hang on and come back after the commercial break?
Well, we'll hang on and come back after the commercial break. Great. But you know what it costs for a heart surgery in the UK? $14,000. You know what it cost here? $150,000.
A heart surgery is $14,000 in the UK?
Coronary bypass surgery in the UK, last checked, $14,000. In New Zealand, it's $26,000. In Australia, it's $43,000. That's the highest compared to us, and we're at $150,000.
That's amazing. Well, that's Mark from Fridley. He's going to hang out. He's got a thing about the omnibus bill, and we're going to talk about that and borders, because that's the big topic nationally. It's going to affect all of us. Remember, Minnesotans, we live in a border state. That should inform our conversation about our southern border as well. We'll be back here on AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. Hey, welcome back. AM 950, the Progressive Voice of Minnesota. It's 4:50. The sky's a little lighter than it was yesterday. I can feel it. We're breaking out of the dark days without a lot of light. Hey, Brett, I don't know if I ever told you this, but did you know I grew up with Milda of Milda's Cafe fame?
Oh, you did? Okay.
I did.
So.
Yeah, I grew up in an apartment complex. I lived on the first floor. Milda lived right above me. My entire life, Milda's Cafe was a thing. It's passed on.
Have you ever had those authentic Finnish pasties before?
No, I have never had an authentic Finnish pasty at Milda's. Have you?
I have not, but they sound good. My mom actually did at one point. She had no idea they were an AM 950 advertiser, and her group of friends went there and they loved them.
Well, I think we should have one of our, one of our planning meetings over there at Milda's.
Let's agree.
Pull that off. Maybe we can bring Mark from Fridley with us since he's on the line. Hey, Mark, you should join us over at Milda's for a Finnish pasty. But hey, Mark, you want to talk a little bit about the omnibus bill and health care?
Well, that and health care, because, well, also, I just want to jump on what the discussion with the wall is.
Yeah.
And I have a background in military psychological operations and propaganda. And what the wall is.
I know. You always hit me like you're a propagandist. When you always strike me as a propagandist when you call. I'm like, this guy is a professional propagandist. I can tell you. You're military grade, my friend.
Guns, God, and gays. And we can't, in the era of identity and tribal politics, we can't argue about gay marriage anymore because that's already been taken care of, so that's off the table. We're not talking about gun control, but we need something to divide us and distract us, and that's all this
That's all it is.
And we're looking, when somebody tells you, look over here, look behind you. The second thing with health care, and this is our problem, and this is what we have to resolve. Barack Obama ran in 2007 as a senator as an advocate of Medicare for all.
Yep.
When he had the opportunity to actually do something about it, we ended up with an abomination, really, and called Obamacare. And it's again, I call it that because the guy that created it, the architect for Obamacare, stated publicly that the lack of transparency is a huge advantage, and basically, call it the stupidity of the American voter or whatever, but basically that was really, really critical to getting this thing to pass because the American people are too stupid to understand the difference. Now, Barack Obama just came out recently and said that Medicare for all is a really good idea. It's not a good idea. It's not a new idea, but but when we get people in charge, in power, in control, and again, why do we pay 70 times more than what people in Europe pay for a tonsillectomy or to fix a broken bone or, to have a coronary bypass operation? My daughter was in Australia with a study abroad program. A kid from the United Kingdom actually broke his leg in Australia, and he got it fixed for free. Yeah, basically no questions asked.
Well, thanks, Mark. Yeah, I really do appreciate it, and and I've been on Obama about that too, and the people who think differently about Obama's take on this regularly remind me that what President Obama argued at the time and has tried to argue consistently was that Obamacare was supposed to be the start of a process to get us into a different relationship with healthcare. And they argue, and I don't think they're just being defensive. I do remember him saying this, and I remember thinking at the time that's not going to work. I remember him saying this is just a start. I remember Joe Biden, then vice president, soon to be, I think, presidential candidate, leaning over his shoulder. You might remember at the signing ceremony and saying this is a big effing deal, Mr. President, because they say you're reminded that President Obama was saying this doesn't go far enough, but this is all we can get right now in the current state of holding together the House, which was Democrats, and Senate, which was kind of running away on him. So they would argue he was negotiating the best deal he could get at the time. This is the problem with arguing for the best thing you can get at the time, is it leaves you 10 years later with what Mark referred to as something that's more of an abomination and has done nothing but sort of keep all of us paying extremely high premiums and didn't solve the problem. Because sometimes the experiment needed longer to give it a try, and then rightly so, people blame the Republicans for not allowing any kind of continuation of the development of the Affordable Care Act and instead being in opposition to it the entire time. So it's a good point, and but I think what we need to do at this point is just pivot again and not worry about was that a good choice from Obama or not. It just was, and drive forward to renegotiating the relationship of healthcare. I had a hip replacement surgery about 2 years ago. It's kind of a, it's not a heart surgery or anything, but it's a surgery, and you go in and you're in the hospital overnight and all this stuff. I was shocked when I got the itemized bill that my surgeon was only paid $1,400. Out of like my $14,000 or $34,000 or $64,000, I had insurance at that, some crazy amount of money totally. And the amount that went just to the doctor and then the amount that went all the way across the system. It's amazing where the money goes. Once you get into the actual budgets, once you get into the actual costs that go on, and this isn't even like heart disease or diabetes or long-term chronic issues. A really expensive surgery, and where's the money? Because it was shocking to me that the surgeon, who's to me, and the anesthesiologist, the most important people in the whole deal, $1,400. I don't know how he can work for that kind of money with all the things he has to keep running and keep doing. It's amazing. It's an amazing thing. But I also want to pivot on this. We only have a couple of minutes left, but this border conversation with Donald Trump tonight. I'm going to lose all kinds of sight of things that are important. I agree with Mark that it's a bit of he's given us the Sugar Ray, Leonard, where he does the whoop-de-doo with the right hand and hits you with the left. That's what the Trump administration is trying to do. This is distraction. But I want to make the point every time borders come up that very often I hear Democrats, especially conservative Democrats, say, nobody's arguing for open borders. Nobody wants open borders. I do. I totally think we should have open borders. Now, if that rings your bell, if you're thinking like, why would somebody want open borders? That doesn't make any sense. Then you have to ask yourself the question, what do you mean by open borders compared to closed borders? Obviously, we want people coming in. Open and closed is this strange metaphor. What I want is the free flow of people back and forth between countries, something more similar to what we have between states. That's a better way to do it. When I went to Mexico in November for vacation, that was kind of an open border. Just flew down, didn't really have to check in with anybody. Just had my paperwork stamped, gave it when I came back and came right back in and out. No problem. There is a border. We recognize that it was open. But if you're Mexican trying to get into this country, holy moly, you act like you're a criminal from the start. Why do we criminalize one side of the border and not the other? There's an open border, us going to Mexico. Seems to work fine. We have an open border between Canada and here. People can come and go. There's something else going on with Mexico. And if we're not clear about that, then we're playing right into this Republican idea that Mexicans are dangerous to our economy, to our well-being, to our safety. And that's what we have to worry about. So anytime somebody says, I don't want an open border, ask them what the benefit of a closed border is and what they really mean by it, because it's going to be the conversation that Donald Trump's going to drive us into tonight. And I think we have to have a much different progressive response than, well, of course you're right. We have to have some version of a closed border. Nonsense. It's Doug Padgett, it's AM 950, the progressive voice of Minnesota.
Crushing the last American night.